use our knowledge of selection tools and take this person out of this painting and put them on the background that we of the file that we just created. To do that, I'm going to use the quick selection tool, and then I want to make sure that my selection is set at plus, and I'm just going to start painting onto this person. And Photoshop is going to do an okay job. It's not going to do a perfect job of selecting this person, but I can help it by moving around and having a smaller brush size and really finessing what I want Photoshop to include. Here, this part of the dress, for example. But you can see that it didn't do a perfect job, and I need to actually tell the quick selection tool what's up and what the actual edge of the selection should be. Now I can go and hit the subtract, and that'll allow me to subtract from the selection, and here I'm refining that edge and telling Photoshop, no, this is actually what I want. I'm going to go back to plus so that I can demonstrate a really important shortcut here. If we hold down the option key when we have the options selected at the plus add to selection, it will toggle to the minus. So now I can quickly hold down the option button and then subtract from, and then add to very quickly when I let go of the options button, the selection. So this will allow me to go back and forth and really tell Photoshop, well, you were okay, you kind of got it, but now this is actually what I'm thinking of. So I'm going to make a pass around the contour of this figure doing that technique, and I stress the importance of practicing this because it might seem tedious at first, but you'll actually get it very quickly. So going Command plus again so that we can zoom in, and hitting the option button and just refining the edge of this figure. This is really hard because the tones are so similar that Photoshop has a hard time determining what we're thinking when we clicked into that specific area. But this is a pretty good general selection here, and I can actually move this over to the other background by simply doing Command C for copy. And you can see it changes my cursor to a little scissor, and I'm going to go to the untitled one and then hit Command V on my keyboard, and then here I'm going to move this to the move tool, and I'm going to hit Command plus, and you can see now that we have that figure there. The edges are okay, they're not perfect, but we're going to be shown a more advanced way to actually incorporate refining our edge of our selection. But this is pretty interesting because we have it here in our overall composition. The interesting thing about this is that you can change, and just be careful because know that you can change the scale of this layer that you're dragging over. To do that quickly is Command T on the keyboard, and you can see Command T turns it into a transform layer. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and pull from the corner. And a new feature which is really interesting in the newer version of Photoshop is that if you hold down the Shift key and pull, it actually lets you stretch it, which is the opposite of the previous version. So just to amend what I said, if you just click and drag, it'll scale up and it'll keep that aspect ratio. You just have to be really careful when you're doing this, because if this is a very small low resolution, if you upscale a lot, then it's going to be a really pixelated image. So you want to be careful. Don't upscale too much. It gives you a little guide of how large this is actually going to be, but for a strategy on incorporating this into your larger project, this is really key to understanding. Now, after you get the size that you want, you can move it around, but you can't move on until you hit the check button at the top or simply hit the enter key on your keyboard, the return or enter key. And then that'll set that new transformation, and then you can move it independently now as a separate layer. If you wanted to transform this layer again, here you just make sure that you select that layer, hit Command T, and then you can edit it again. A really interesting one is that if you wanted to pull, you can make it flip. You can also rotate if you wanted to. And so these are all options. Here I'm holding down the Shift key and then flipping it in this way so that it'll let me kind of drag it over here. So there are a lot of options that you can do with in terms of manipulating the position of your layer, especially if you're trying to get that layer to be in a very specific place in regards to your composition. So I'll just hit enter to lock that down, and you can see that we've repositioned it accordingly.